I never thought I'd be the kind of man telling this story. Not because I thought I was special or immune to heartbreak, but because my wife, April, was the one person in this world I never thought would lie to me. I married her when I was 30. We met in a grocery store, just two people grabbing the same loaf of bread. We laughed, exchanged numbers, and the rest, as they say, just happened. That was almost 9 years ago. We didn't have a perfect life, but it was good. We didn't have kids yet. We were trying, but honestly, I think I was the one dragging my feet. I work as a project manager for a construction firm, mostly away from home during the week and back on weekends. She's a dental assistant, works 4 days a week, always home by 5:30, usually prepping dinner with her music playing in the background. Small town rhythm, simple stuff. We were that couple who sat at the same booth every Friday at Denny's. Then one night, something shifted. It was a Thursday. I came home a day early from a job site, wanted to surprise her. I walked through the front door and didn't hear music. No dinner smells. Just a quiet house and a single lamp on in the living room. April wasn't there. Her phone was. That detail will sit with me forever. Her phone, the one that never left her side, was on the couch. I don't know why I looked. I know that makes me the villain in someone's story, but in mine, it was the moment everything started to fall apart. There was a text thread open. The contact name was just a first name, Jake, and the messages were suggestive. Casual. The kind of casual that only comes from intimacy. Stuff like, still thinking about last night. You left a mark on my neck, babe. Can't wait until he's gone again. I stared at the screen until it dimmed. Then I just sat there. For almost an hour. No rage, no tears. Just that sinking, dizzy, stomach-turning confusion. When she finally came home, she acted like nothing was wrong. Smiled, kissed my cheek, said, "Oh, you're home early." I watched her like a stranger watching a stranger. I didn't say anything, just nodded. That night, I couldn't sleep. I laid next to her and stared at the ceiling. I wanted to believe it was innocent. Maybe it was a joke. Maybe it was a friend messing around. Maybe I was misunderstanding everything. But deep down, I already knew. And so, the next day, I installed a tracking app on her phone. Quietly, I hated myself for doing it. Felt like I was crossing a line I never wanted to even look at. But I had to know. I had to know who Jake was. The hardest part of that first day wasn't planning the tracking app, it was pretending like everything was normal. I still made her coffee. Still kissed her forehead when she left for work. Still smiled when she said, "Don't work too hard today, babe." I just nodded, like a puppet running off old programming. But the whole time, my heart was pounding in my ears. The moment she left, I pulled out my phone and opened the app. A little blinking dot showed her phone on the map, moving east toward downtown. Okay, I thought, probably heading to the clinic. And for most of the morning, that's where she stayed, right at the dental office where she worked. I started to wonder if I had imagined the whole thing. Maybe it really was just a friend being inappropriate. Maybe the name, Jake, meant nothing. Then 12:15 hit. Her phone left the office. Now, April usually took her lunch break inside the clinic. She always said it wasn't worth driving anywhere, and besides, she hated fast food. So when I saw her driving down 9th Avenue, I knew something was off. At 12:32 p.m., the dot stopped moving, right outside a motel. One of those cheap roadside places with faded paint and curtains that never fully close. My chest tightened like someone had dropped a cinder block on it. I waited, watched. That little blinking dot sat there. For 18 minutes. Then it started moving again. Back to the office, like nothing happened. That night, she was sweet again. A little too sweet. Told me she missed me. Ran her fingers through my hair while we watched TV. I wanted so badly to turn to her and say, "Who is Jake? What were you doing at the Alpine Inn today?" But I didn't. I couldn't, not yet. I needed more. The next day, she called me in the afternoon, said she'd be staying late at the clinic. One of the other assistants had called out, and they were backed up with cleanings. I said, "Okay, stay safe. I'll see you tonight." But my hands were already pulling up the app. She wasn't at the clinic. She was back at the same motel. This time she stayed 42 minutes. I sat in my truck outside a job site with my phone shaking in my hands. My foreman knocked on my window to ask if everything was okay, and I just told him I had a family emergency. That night, I couldn't eat. She came home smelling like that same cheap vanilla body spray she always wore, but now it made me nauseous. I couldn't look her in the eye. She noticed, but didn't push. And then, Saturday morning, something happened that confirmed it all. I was out running errands and stopped for gas. And right there, parked on the other side of the lot, was a man I'd never seen before. Clean cut, maybe early 40s, wearing a black hoodie and leaning against a beat-up red pickup. I wouldn't have thought twice about him, except he was holding her coffee. The same order she always got from the diner down the street. I only noticed it because she always asked for 2 extra pumps of vanilla syrup, and they always wrote V+2 on the side of the cup. It was on his cup. And then he got in his truck, and I watched him drive 2 blocks, right to the same motel. He had her coffee. She wasn't there yet, but I had a feeling she would be. I didn't follow him at first. I just sat there in my truck, parked behind the gas station, watching his taillights disappear into the glare of late morning sun. It felt like every part of me was screaming to get out and do something, but I didn't know what. I wasn't the type to explode. I'm the guy who fixes things. Quietly, with my hands, with plans, with patience. But this? There was no blueprint for this. After 5 minutes, I pulled out of the lot and circled around the block. The motel had a side alley where you could see the doors to each unit from a distance. I parked where I had a clear view but couldn't be seen. Just waited, and at exactly 10:13 a.m., April's car pulled in. I watched her park. She didn't even hesitate. She stepped out in tight jeans I hadn't seen before and a loose, gray sweater that dipped off one shoulder. Her hair was curled, deliberately. And she had makeup on. Heavy makeup, not her normal look. This was effort. She grabbed her purse and walked fast, like she'd done it 100 times before. No looking around, no hesitation, just straight to the door where that man had gone. I sat there in that truck, gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing keeping me upright. My stomach felt hollow. My mouth was dry, but I didn't cry. Not yet. I waited 15 minutes. Then I got out and walked. Not toward their door, but around the back. The motel was old, poorly kept. A few of the rooms had windows facing the back alley, and some of the curtains didn't close all the way. I kept walking until I found the room. The curtain was half open. What I saw through that narrow strip of glass will never leave my head. I saw my wife, my April, laughing. Not just a chuckle, laughing like she hadn't in years. Like she was weightless. And that man, Jake, I assumed. He was sitting on the edge of the bed, shirt off, reaching for her waist as she stepped between his legs. She leaned in and kissed him. It wasn't a hungry kiss. It wasn't desperate. It was tender, familiar. Like this wasn't new. Like this was routine. I staggered back a few steps and leaned against the wall behind the dumpster. That's when the tears hit me. Not dramatic sobbing. Just quiet, painful streams that blurred everything in front of me. This wasn't some mistake. This wasn't some one-time thing. She had a whole other version of herself, one I never got to see. One that dressed up and laughed and kissed like she was still alive. And none of it was for me. I didn't confront her. I couldn't. Not yet. I got back in my truck and drove 2 towns over to a friend's place, Dan. He's the kind of guy who doesn't ask questions unless you ask for answers. We sat in silence for an hour before I said a single word. He just handed me a beer and said, "Take your time." And when I finally told him what I saw, he didn't flinch. Just nodded and said, "You need a plan. Not revenge. A plan." He was right. That night, I didn't go home. I messaged April and said I was staying out with work buddies. She replied, "Okay, babe. Have fun. Miss you." Like nothing happened. Like she wasn't with someone else that same morning, in that same bed, laughing and kissing and pretending I didn't exist. The next morning, I woke up on Dan's old couch with a crick in my neck and the taste of stale beer in my mouth. The first thing I did was check the tracker. April's phone was still at home. Home. That word didn't mean the same thing anymore. I thought about just going back and confronting her. I pictured walking through the front door, throwing it all on the table, yelling, crying, getting it over with. But Dan's words stuck with me. You need a plan. Not revenge. So that morning, I started building one. I drove to a local electronics store and picked up a few things. A motion-sensitive camera small enough to hide in a bookshelf, and a portable audio recorder with solid battery life. It wasn't high-end spy gear, but it didn't need to be. It just needed to work. When I finally went home, it was just after noon. April was already out. She said she was running errands. I knew better. That gave me a window. I went room by room, planting what I needed. The camera went in our bedroom, tucked into the mess of books and plants on the dresser. It faced the bed, angled just right. I knew it was a risk, but if she was bringing him here while I was gone during the week, I needed to know. The audio recorder went under the passenger seat in her car. It felt wrong, violating. Like I was the one sneaking around. But when your gut's been screaming for weeks and your eyes finally catch up, you stop caring about the rules. That night, she came home with Thai food. Smiled like she was proud of herself for picking my favorite. We ate dinner in the living room, and she talked about her day. Made up errands, new toothpaste, something about a coworker's dog. I barely heard a word. I kept looking at her mouth, wondering what it had done that morning. Who it had kissed, what lies it had told. When she leaned against me on the couch, I froze. It felt like I was letting a stranger into my skin. But I didn't move. I needed more. Over the next 3 days, I tracked everything. Every move, every excuse, every smile she gave me that felt like it belonged to someone else. And then Thursday came. That morning, she kissed me goodbye like always, said she had a short shift and might hit the gym after work. I said, take your time. Once she was gone, I pulled the audio recorder from her car and loaded it onto my laptop. What I heard made my jaw tighten. A man's voice, laughing. Her voice, giggling, joking about the old man being too dumb to notice. They talked about meeting again at the motel. He teased her about something she wore. She told him she missed his smell. And then she said it. He doesn't touch me like you do. He hasn't in a long time. My stomach turned, not because of the words, but because she sounded honest. Like she really believed it. I hit pause and just sat there. And that's when I realized something that hurt even more than the affair. Somewhere along the way, I stopped seeing her. Not completely, not in the big ways. But in the little ones. The soft ones. The ones you don't think matter until someone else starts noticing them. And she let someone else in. That didn't justify what she did, but it made me see the whole wreckage a little clearer. That night, I checked the bedroom camera. And there it was. She hadn't brought him home yet, but she was getting bolder. She came home after the gym, stood in front of the mirror, and took a picture of herself in a towel. Then sent it. I saw the message pop up on her screen. Wish I was unwrapping this with you tonight. I saved the footage. The truth was building now, quietly, steadily. And I was finally seeing her for who she really was. But what I didn't expect was what I was about to find next. It was Friday night when I finally cracked. Not because of a new message or another motel visit. No, what broke me wasn't her, it was him. See, the name, Jake, had been bouncing around in my head all week, but it never clicked. It sounded generic. I figured he was just some guy she met on an app or maybe a coworker I'd never heard about. But that night, while she was in the shower, I picked up her phone. Yeah, I know. Another line crossed. Another piece of trust already broken. But at this point, I wasn't playing by any honorable code. She'd already shredded every part of the life we built. I was just digging through the pieces now. She had a photo gallery folder hidden in a buried app. Password protected, but not well. She used the same 4-digit code she used for everything. And when I opened that folder, everything I thought I knew collapsed all over again. Because there were pictures. Dozens. Her and Jake, together. In his truck, in cheap motels. Even one in our backyard when I was out of town last month. Him shirtless, her straddling him. Both of them laughing. Filthy captions. Dirty jokes. But that's not what broke me. What broke me was the third photo. It was the two of them sitting at a diner. The one off Highway 14, just outside of town. We used to eat there when we were first dating. I looked at the ketchup bottle on the table and remembered the night she told me she wanted to marry me, right at that booth. But in the photo, she's looking at him like he's her whole world. And I recognized him. It hit me all at once. Jake wasn't a stranger. He was the guy who helped us move into this house 5 years ago. A friend of her cousin's. I only met him once or twice. Seemed harmless. Quiet. Didn't talk much, but I remembered the face. I remember it now because I shook his hand. I offered him a beer. I said, thanks for helping us. And now here he was, 5 years later, drinking from the same coffee mugs I used, lying on the same sheets I bought, sending her pictures from my backyard. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was personal. That night, I didn't say a word. She got out of the shower, wrapped in a towel, humming something. I pretended to be half asleep. She kissed my forehead and climbed into bed beside me. I just stared at the ceiling, wide awake, heart pounding, wondering if the man sleeping beside her was even real to her anymore. Or if I'd already been replaced in her mind, and this was just the waiting room before she walked out for good. But I knew this now. She hadn't slipped. She hadn't made a mistake. She had chosen him, again and again, and I had to decide what I was going to do with that truth. By Saturday morning, the weight of everything I knew had settled deep into my chest, like someone had filled my lungs with wet cement. I could breathe, but barely. Everything I did that day was mechanical. Shaving, brushing my teeth, making coffee, all while trying not to look at her. Because if I looked too long, I might lose it. She was acting normal again. Joking with me in the kitchen, scrolling on her phone, humming like nothing in the world was wrong. Like she wasn't sneaking off to cheap motels. Like she wasn't sleeping with a man whose hand I once shook. But now I saw the cracks. I noticed the way she kept checking her phone when she thought I wasn't looking. The way she was short with me whenever I asked small, innocent questions. The distance. It had been there for months. I just didn't have the map to see it until now. And the worst part? I still loved her. God help me, even after everything. I still loved the woman I thought she was. That afternoon, I drove out to Dan's again. I had the audio recordings, the camera footage, the texts, the photos. Jesus, he said when I showed him. Yeah, what now? I don't know. That was the truth. Because despite everything I had, I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel powerful. I felt small. Like my whole identity had been built around this relationship, and now that it was collapsing, I couldn't even figure out who I was outside of it. I don't want to blow up her life, I said. I just want the truth to mean something. Dan looked at me for a long time, then said something I'll never forget. You're not doing this to destroy her. You're doing this to stop destroying yourself. He was right. For too long, I'd been pretending. Smiling at dinner, kissing her forehead, nodding along like I didn't already know what she was doing behind my back. So that night, I printed 3 photos. One of her and Jake at the diner. One of them kissing in the motel parking lot. And one of the messages she sent. You make me feel alive again. I placed them in a plain envelope, wrote her name on the front, and left it on her pillow before I walked out the door. I didn't leave forever, just needed space. I texted her. Don't call me tonight. We'll talk in the morning. She responded. Is everything okay? I didn't answer. I slept in my truck at a rest stop 30 miles outside of town. Cold, alone, empty, but for the first time in weeks, I felt something close to peace. Because I wasn't hiding anymore. I wasn't lying to myself. She would open that envelope. She would know I knew. And in the morning, we would finally talk. When I pulled into the driveway the next morning, the sun was just creeping over the rooftops. The house looked the same. Our house. But I didn't feel like I belonged to it anymore. Her car was there. She hadn't left. The envelope was gone from the pillow. I walked through the front door and there she was. Sitting on the edge of the couch, still in her pajamas, hair tied up, holding the envelope in her lap like it was a grenade that hadn't gone off yet. She looked up at me. Her face was pale, eyes red. We stared at each other for a few seconds, the kind that stretch out and never quite let go. Then she said it. I didn't mean for it to happen. And I laughed. A short, bitter laugh I didn't know was coming. You didn't mean to cheat on me for 3 months? You didn't mean to lie every time you kissed me goodbye? You didn't mean to bring him into this life we built? She didn't answer. She just looked at the floor and said, I felt dead, Tim. I felt invisible. And he saw me. I stood there, leaning against the wall, hands in my jacket pockets, trying to keep it together. You think I didn't notice something was wrong? You think I didn't feel it every time you pulled away a little more? She looked up again. Then why didn't you say something? Because I kept hoping I was wrong. I kept hoping the woman I loved was still in there somewhere. Her voice cracked. I never stopped loving you. I shook my head. You stopped choosing me. And that was the truth. Love's not just some feeling that comes and goes with the wind. It's a choice. A damn hard one, sometimes. But it's one you make every day. And she stopped making it. There was a long silence after that. I walked to the table, sat down across from her. I need to ask you one thing, I said. And I need you to answer me without crying, without justifying, without spinning it. Just tell me the truth. She nodded, barely. Did you ever bring him here? Into our house? She hesitated. Then, once. The day before your birthday. And that was it. That was the nail. The last breath in the dying lungs of what we used to be. I stood up and said, I'll call a lawyer this week. I'm not gonna drag this through the mud. But I can't stay. You know that, right? She nodded again. I understand. I grabbed a bag I'd packed the night before and walked to the door. Before I left, I turned back one last time. You could have just told me you weren't happy. We could have talked. We could have tried. She looked up at me, tears finally falling now. I was afraid you'd leave. And I said, you made sure of it. Then I walked out. It's been 6 weeks now. I'm renting a small apartment near the job site. It's quiet, lonely sometimes, but honest. I haven't seen her since. We talk through email, mostly about logistics, bills, the house, the car. We're being civil, but I won't lie to you. Some nights, I still miss her. Not the version that lied. Not the woman who disappeared behind motel curtains. I miss the woman who met me in the bread aisle of a grocery store. Who wore that faded hoodie and smiled at me like I was the only person in the world. But that version of her doesn't exist anymore. And maybe the version of me that needed her doesn't either.